I'm Ray Paloutzian, and what I'll do is introduce me a little bit, and then what we have is 2 hours to have a good time talking about writing and journal publication and all the practical things. And the real goal is to help you. Now, I've sent you two things that Demetrius gave you. One is an article that I hope you've all read, not for substance, that's not important, but for structure and how to craft a paper. And I want to walk you through that very carefully, because if you follow that example, you will always have a well-crafted paper. That doesn't mean a journal editor is going to take it, but the paper will be good in terms of how it's put together. That has to happen, or else it doesn't go any further. So I'll walk you through that. And then the other thing that he sent you was a handout that I typed up yesterday called Demetrius's Edit Lesson, which the first 2 pages are basically the structure of a paper that you're going to know anyway, and you already know. And the rest of it is notes that I wrote off the top of my head of do's and don'ts and things and problems that I encounter all the time by people who should know better, etc. So that's what we'll do. You are welcome to interrupt any time you don't want to hear me lecture. You'd rather hear me discuss with you and have a good time. So let's see, a bit about me. I am an old guy. I'm as old as dirt, at least in terms of the psychology of religion, and now talking the science of religion. I was one of the people who had the luck of helping it happen in the last part of the 20th century. I was a doctoral student from 1968 to 1972, and I realize that's a very long time ago in all of your minds. But yet, there really was such a time, and that's when I did this. And at that time, there was no such thing as the psychology of religion, or CSR. It simply didn't exist. And to study this topic in my field, which is experimental social psych, was simply taboo. It simply wasn't done. Now, it's very different. We have people in not only religiously affiliated colleges and universities, but we have people in mainstream state universities in the US and in Europe. They're actually doing research in the psych of religion and cognitive science of religion, which is something that I spent my professional lifetime trying to promote, to try to move this topic into the mainstream. And you all, believe it or not, are part of the consequences of that. And so I feel pretty lucky that I got to help it happen. But when I began, no, there was no such thing. When I started to teach a course in this, in my first real professor job in during the 70s, sometime during the 70s, if you, as I did, went to try to find a book on this topic, to teach research of the kind you're doing in a university course, the number of books that existed were zero. They're truly zero, none. No textbooks, nothing, zero. I used to do it with articles. And I used to fantasize that there would be journals and handbooks on the topic, but that was just a pure fantasy. And now there are those things, and I edit one of the journals, and I'm the editor of the first handbook in the field. So it's coming off a long way, and I feel pretty lucky that I got to do it. So let's go to this sample article that I asked you to read, and let me walk you through its key elements. Again, when you start to interrupt, that's probably better. When questions come to mind, just ask, and then after short order, we'll go over to this other handout where I wrote a bunch of ideas there and questions that are really stimulus questions for you. All right? And you can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Somebody say something so I know I can hear you again.
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, okay, that's okay. All right, so I'm standing up back here, and I'm looking at a whiteboard, and I've drawn a diagram of an hourglass. Let's see, can you see it?
Yeah.
All right, all right. All right, you know, an hourglass is shaped big at the top, narrow in the middle, and then gets big at the bottom. And sand goes through and like that. All right. That is a picture to keep in mind for the structure of a well-done paper. I should tell you, wait a minute, you need to know something else. I've edited a journal for 15 years. I've been editing the International Journal for the Psychology of Religion since 1997, which is a long time ago, you know, in your lives. And I've made decisions on about 1,000 manuscripts. Okay, about 1,000 manuscripts. I'm the guy who decides. And you might ask, well, when is a paper good enough? Because it's whenever I say so. Why is it good enough? It's because I say so. You know, I mean, like, the buck stops right here. I take it very seriously, though. And I gotta just share a few thoughts right at the beginning. A good editor doesn't do favors or disfavors for people. You don't publish somebody because you're their friend. You don't publish their work because they're friends. You don't deny their work because you're their enemy or you dislike them. The only thing that counts is the words on the paper and the sequence that they're in. That's it. That is the bottom line. That is what it's about. It's not about the person. And I have to say no to about 80% of the papers submitted to me. You know, you might ask, what is the rejection rate of a good journal? Well, 75 or 80% is 75% is an ordinary rejection rate for a good quality journal. So you can assume before you submit a journal article to an editor, you know, by chance, what are the odds? Well, it's about, you know, about 75% that the editor will say no, about 25% yes, and even there, it's very seldom that a paper is submitted as it is, that is accepted as it is submitted. Let me ask you, if you have a sense for this, what percent of papers do you think that are submitted to journals, good journals, are acceptable exactly as they are submitted, without any change? You know, what proportion of papers are accepted exactly as they are submitted?
0.1%.
It's about exactly 1%, between 0.5% and 1%. Yeah, I have made a decision on about 1,000 papers, and I've done that about 7 times. So everything is revise and resubmit. So if you get a revise and resubmit, that's good, because that means the editor wants you to do it. If you get a revise and resubmit, that's in no way a bad thing. That's a good thing, because that means the editor wants it. An editor won't say revise and resubmit just to make you feel good or something. The editor will bother with that only if the editor thinks that the thing you're working on is good enough that the next round can make it. Okay, so if you get a revise and resubmit, that's a positive thing. It's not really neutral. It's really positive because almost nothing is acceptable as submitted. So that's FYI. All right. This hourglass is the structure to follow. And the most important thing, if you take out the copy of my article that I presume you read, all right, the most important part of a paper, the hardest part of the paper to write, is the introduction. And the critical part of that to write is something right here that I just put black marks in for it. But I call it the linkage or the rationale. Let me explain what that is. This is the introduction to an article right here, from here to here. All right, and looking at this thing I've given you, look at the first sentence of the first 3 paragraphs. All right, everybody see that in front of you? The first sentence of the first paragraph says, "By intuition, one might suppose that complete personal changes, such as those that occur in religious conversion, are rare. We tend to think that people are stable, yet in recent years, millions of people have done this." Okay? Right there. Okay. That's what I put up here is this first step. That's raising the question. All right? Now, the first paragraph of the second sentence says, "Theoretical statements about this have varied." And then it goes on, blah, blah, blah. There's this kind of theory, that kind of theory, right? That second sentence is the next thing to address. So I have a paragraph that does that. That's the second mark right here. Then the first sentence of the third paragraph on the next page says, okay, prior research on this has shown this and that. And then I have a paragraph that summarizes, cites relevant studies that to more or less degree speak to this question of, how might religious conversion affect the sense of purpose in life. All right, 1, 2, 3, bing, bing, bing. In 3 medium-sized paragraphs, what I've done is do everything that constitutes the background to this study. First, 1 paragraph. Here's the question, here's the issue to be addressed. 1 paragraph. Here's the theoretical notions that may bear upon it. 1 paragraph. Here's a sketch of the research whose evidence seems to bear upon it. 1, 2, 3. All right? Now, that logic, it has to be there, but do not make it long. I get papers that, I almost always, not from very real experienced authors, but from beginning authors, I almost always have to tell them to cut their introduction down from 20 pages to 5. And it will be much, much better if they do that. You might say, really? And the answer is, yeah, really. I always have to tell people to shorten stuff, their papers, because people think that that everything they have to say is what's needed, and it's not. Let me put it another way. In the introduction to a research paper, that is not the place to review everything about a topic. All right? Not the place. The only thing you need to touch on there is what feeds the point of this specific study. That and only that. So, for example, using this topic as an example, religious conversion and the effects of that on purpose in life and value changes. This is not a place to review all the research on religious conversion. That's a matter of a handbook chapter, that I've written too many of because I'm tired of the topic, and a book. Or that's the introduction to your dissertation. Okay? This is not that. That's not the kind of review that goes into the beginning of a research paper. What goes into the beginning of a research paper is specifically and only what feeds this specific study, and that's all. So the rule of thumb is shorter is better. It should be as short as possible while still including every essential piece of ingredients. Okay? If you do that, then you'll have a tight, compelling piece of writing, and it will make your chances, the chances of your paper, much greater. In fact, I'll tell you a thing never to do. Do not submit your dissertation as a dissertation to a journal editor. Sometimes I get submissions from new PhDs where their introduction is 20 pages long or more, and it really is, they just sent their dissertation. And so the introduction is way long. It's a review of everything, you know, the whole topic, and their methods is way more elaborated than it needs to be, and so on and so on and so on. And they have, 17 tables when just 2 will do for their actual study. That's something just don't do. There's a real translation process from taking a dissertation and translating it into a journal article format. Everybody know what I'm talking? Do you understand what I'm talking about here? How many of you have written or are writing dissertations? Yes? Okay. All right. Well, yeah, don't ever just take the introduction to your dissertation and then think that that's an introduction to a research paper. It is 99% of the time it's not, and they usually have to be cut down by about 75% to become good, sharp, focused. Okay. Now I won't. There's no need for me to. I'll assume here. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't need to go through each of these paragraphs and fill in the holes. When I say paragraph number 1, by institution, we might suppose that conversion is rare, but it really happens quite a lot. Do I need to go on and read through that and let you see how come that paragraph does what it's supposed to, or you've read it and you got it? Yeah? Yeah. In other words, you're with it. I hope. Yeah, I'm trying to read your faces, but you have to tell me. I can't see very well here. Okay. So you know what each of those paragraphs is doing. All right. Then go for a second to the last little tiny paragraph of the introduction, just above the methods center heading. That's a place where, depending on how you're telling your research story, where you'd say, okay, given all of the above, my hypotheses are 1, 2, 3, or by implication, which is the way I did it here, as a transitional note from the introduction to the methods section, I have a little note that said, well, this circumstance that was happening at the university gave me the opportunity to test some of these ideas, okay? And that's kind of an implied, the hypotheses are not literally explicit, but they're implied by what's been said, and that's a transitional note. Okay, whether you formally state hypotheses by actually writing them out, or have them implied by what you've written, is a judgment call, and is a matter of how clear it's already been implied, and so there's no need to repeat them. If they aren't clearly already implied, then you may need to actually write them explicitly. But in either case, there needs to be some version of a transitional note from the rest of the introduction that came before to the methods, and that's a little something that does that in this paper. Now, those are the easy parts. It's easy to write the question. It's easy to say, here's some theories that bear upon it, so long as you understand them. And it's easy to say, well, here's some research that bears upon it, so long as you understand that and how to not misrepresent it. The hard part, the part that this is all about, is this thing right between them. Here's the question, the basic idea of the question. Here's theoretical ideas about it. Here's research that bears upon it. Here's this little transitional note that goes just before the methods. Right there, between these two, after you've covered the question, the theory, and the research, and before you say, okay, now here's where I'm going to actually go do, right there is where you write the rationale for your specific study. Not rationale for all kinds of work, rationale for this specific study. In other words, this is going to get you to exactly what you are going to do in this study and exactly the data you're going to report. Now, that is really what it, i.e. your study, is all about. That is it. If you can write that well, then you've nailed it perfectly. The rest is really easy. Writing the methods section, writing the procedures, writing who the subjects are, and what your apparatus or your questionnaires are, or whatever, your behavioral observation methods. Those are easy. Those are mechanical kinds of writing. You just write down what you did, or who your subjects were, or it's just documentation. But the hard part, the part that really requires your mind to get it right, to connect the question, theory, and research, past research, you have to speak to those things, speak to the theory and to the research, that connects those to what you're going to do. That linkage is the rationale to your study, to this specific study. And that's the hard part to write. Now, if you get it right, like I say, everything else just falls right into place, and it becomes very comfortable. That's the part that can make you sweat, or it can make me sweat, anyway, and so forth. Now, look at how that's done in this paper that I sent you. On page 1154, second page of it. Okay, the first three paragraphs, like I said, is the question, the theories, and the methods. And then the beginning of the fourth paragraph starts a linkage or rationale section that is, in this case, it happens to be 3 paragraphs long. It could be 1, it could be longer. It depends on what it is, what you're doing. But in this case, it happens to be 3 paragraphs long. So there's 3 steps to it. After summarizing the research, I say, okay, in the present study, the prior research and the general hypothesis that converts would experience more meaning were extended in 3 ways. Okay? That lead sentence sets up this linkage or rationale section. Okay? In other words, let me say it again. In the present study, the past research and ideas are extended 3 ways. Okay? Now it's easy. 1, 2, 3. What are they? Well, the next sentence says, the first one concerns time. The second one, now go to the next paragraph. The second extension of prior work is about something else. Then the third paragraph, the third extension concerns something else. Okay? And again, I won't bother with what the something else's are. First of all, they're just written, and you've already read them. And that's not, in this case, that's not important. I don't care whether you learn what those specifics are. What I care about is that you learn the logic of what I'm doing here. If you apply this kind of logic to your introduction, you will have a tight, focused, compelling, and persuasive introduction to a paper. And if you write that rationale section, that what I've got here in just 3 paragraphs, if you write that well, then truly the rest of the paper falls into place, because the whole rest of the paper is about that. Does this make sense to you? I can't tell unless you tell me.
Yes,
Yes, it does.
Is a thumbs up? Okay, I got a thumbs up. Who is that? That had to be. Let me see if I can get a name right here. That had to be Sylvie or Ava. Is that right?
Almost.
No?
No.
No.
Not it.
I messed up again. How about
I'm not sure you got the right text, you must the right answer.
Daniela? No? Am I getting names all wrong?
It might have been Daniela's head, but the hand was Radek.
All right, well, okay. Sorry for my,
This is
whatever.
the head of
It's
festival.
Radek.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's the crux. If you do that much, the rest is easy. I can't emphasize when I read manuscripts all the time, it's always I can tell by looking at the introduction whether the person has got it or not. If the introduction's all confused, if there's no clear logic, it doesn't have to be. By the way, then the rest of the paper is also a problem, almost 90% of the time. I'll add something here. I am presenting this sequence of logic the way that is simplest for me to understand, and a way that is a good default sequence of logical steps. If you don't know, or if you have trouble figuring out, well, what order should I really present these thoughts in, this is a good sequence. This is a good logic to start with and work in, and write down those thoughts that go in that spot, and write down the other thoughts that go in that spot, and then these other spots that go in that spot, as a way of first drafting your introduction, if you're having trouble thinking about it. Now, this is certainly not the only way in the cosmos to write a good paper. It can be done different ways, but these logical steps have to all be there, and they have to all be there clear, explicit, and focused. And this is the most straightforward way, I think, to put them. And so I will, when I write, I will try to actually write these like stem sentences to the paragraphs, and then put in my thoughts, underneath, cite research underneath, and note the theories underneath the other paragraph, and so on, and then make smooth English out of it later. But this is how I structure the thoughts, and it helps me know where to put a thought, right? And I'll add another detail that is almost always helpful and quite often needed. And that is, of course, the stuff that you're going to fill in the paragraph with, that goes in the middle of the paragraph. And of course, that opening line or two is important because that tells you what the paragraph is going to be about at all. But it's also good to have a last sentence in a paragraph that that is a easy transition from the one that you just finished to the next one. And let's see if I have an example of that here. Well, yeah, all right, take the top of 1150, page 1154, the second page, and the last sentence of the paragraph at the top left column that's ending the paragraph that starts on the previous page. It says, remember that previous paragraph is about theories, and so I close that paragraph by saying, one implication of this idea, what the theories that we're talking about, I introduced the cognitive kind of approach to the sense of purpose in life instead of a psychodynamic kind of theory, all right? So one implication of this idea, that idea, is the hypothesis that converts would score higher on a measure of perceived purpose in life than non-converts, all right? That's a closing sentence that is a perfect transition to the next paragraph, because the next paragraph begins, prior research has yielded only a few studies bearing upon this hypothesis. See that relationship between the sentence at the end of one paragraph and the sentence that begins the next paragraph? Right? Okay, do that. That will make your writing synthetic. It will hold it together. Too often, a paragraph might be good in the sense of it has the right stuff in it, but it's just like not connected with the rest. And it leaves the reader to do too much hard mental work to make the connections. Well, readers' minds don't like to do that. Readers' minds, like my mind, like it easy. My mind is lazy. Your mind is lazy. And so when we read, the writer needs to put the thoughts in there for the reader. And if it's not understood, it's not the fault of the reader. It's the fault of the writer, because the writer's job is to make it understandable to the reader. So that's a thing to do at the end of certain paragraphs, is to make sure you put a sentence that is almost like automatic steps to the next stepping stone. Stepping from the theory to the research in a natural path. That's another thing to do. All right. Now, let's go on to, well, first of all, does anybody have questions for me on what I've said? Ask. We'll have lots of time later anyway, but ask if you have them at the moment. Okay? All right. Then let's go on. Now, the next whole section, the methods section, those are kind of boring to write. Those are easy. They're kind of mechanical, because in the subjects section, or participants nowadays, we say participants. Okay, you say, who are your participants? Describe them to the level of detail that's necessary. In the next subsection, you put whatever tools or apparatus or setting that you had or that you used. So if you actually used an apparatus, describe it and so on. If you used a questionnaire or questionnaires, summarize them. If you had settings like you went to Spain and had people walk on hot coals of fire, then describe where it was and the temperature of the coals and so on. And you just say you say whatever was used. but it's a procedural thing. And then the procedure section itself is really a matter of saying, well, to actually collect the datum from a subject, first they did this, then they did that, then they did this, then they did that, and then I had my data. You know, it's really a descriptive thing. It's not. It doesn't require any analysis on your part. The only twist there to this is that it's sometimes useful to do combine little subsections. I mean, the normal subsections in a methods section of a paper is your subjects or participants, your apparatus or tools, your design, and your procedure. But sometimes it's useful to combine them, as I did here, where I have subjects and design combined. And that is because the nature of the circumstance that allowed me to do the study at all made the subjects and design built into one step. Whereas, because this is a quasi-experiment, is not a true experiment in the sense of, you know, manipulating independent variables. So, but if you actually have a actual design that you crafted and then randomly assign subjects to conditions, so you're really manipulating independent variables and inventing the design, well, then have a section, a subsection called design, experimental design, and simply describe it. You know, it had this independent variable, that independent variable. It was a 2 by 3 factorial design, da 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 da, you know, and like that. In this case, it was not necessary. So, and the key point is clarity of communication. There's no need to do any of these mechanically in the sense of thinking, well, you always have to have a separate section called design. No, you don't. You always have to explain whatever the design might be, but whether that's incorporated within another section or whether it has its own subsection is a matter of what it is that you have that you're working with and communicating about. All right, so enough of that. Now, next, go on to the results. And here are a couple of generic points and a couple of specific points. The generic point is the results and the discussion section. A good default way to organize those things, those thoughts, is analogous to the organization of your introduction. So in your, although really not all of your introduction, because like you don't discuss background and theory, so you know, in your results section, but in terms of the nature of the question, in your in my introduction to this paper, in the rationale section, the linkage section, those 3 paragraphs, I said, you know, prior research and theory is extended in 3 ways in this study. First, second, third. Okay. So in the results section, I have purpose in life, which was first, values in purpose in life, which was second, and the item analysis, which is third. Okay. So that sequence is identical to the sequence in those 3 rationale paragraphs. Okay? So again, if you're struggling with where to put what thoughts, like say you have a bunch of results, and let's say you look at your results and they fall into sort of 3 batches of information, right? They fall naturally into 3 sort of chunks. Well, maybe those 3 chunks are supposed to be part of the rationale of your introduction. and say, okay, in my introduction, you say, I'm going to examine these three things in this study. And then lo and behold, when you get to the results, you present them as 1, 2, and 3. Okay, that is good because it helps you know what you're doing, and it's especially good because it helps the reader know what you're doing. I guess there's a phrase for this. It's called parallel structure, I think. Yeah, I think that's a phrase I hear. Parallel structure. It means, anyway, it just means use the same logic, same logical steps here that you used there. and you use those there because that was the main question, the second question, and the third question. Usually those are in order of importance. Right? Okay, so here you're presenting the main results first, the second most important results second, and the third most results important results third. 1, 2, 3, same logic. It makes it easy for the reader to get it, and it makes your argument in your paper go a lot farther. Okay? What you want is your paper to make a difference somewhere. And this kind of clarity is what does it. Okay? Yeah? Yeah. No mystery. All right, no mystery. Seems pretty straightforward. Now, there's another thing I have to tell you while we're into this, and that is what to do with a table. My goodness, I get stuff from people and professionals who should know better, where their use of a table is terrible. First off, never stick a table in there without referring to the table in the writing. Okay? You might ask me, do I get papers where there's a table stuck in there and it's not cited in the text? The answer is yes. I do. And it's not okay. All right. Then what's a table for? Well, and how do you use it effectively? Now, well, I'll tell you what it's not for. It's not there to take up space. It's not there just to be a picture in a book so that it means you have to read less. You know, like the former U.S. President George Bush, there was a joke about him. He liked certain books because it had a lot of pictures. You know, he wouldn't have to read so much. You know, I got a joke about George Bush not being so smart. Anyway, no, a table or a figure is not there to just look at, and it's certainly not something that you can expect reader to look at and get the meaning of unless you've explained it well. So the key for you to know is that a table and a figure, those things are part of the text. They're not in addition to the text. They are part of the text. All right? Now, let me read a thing and show you what I'm talking about. Right under the center heading that says results, and then there's a subheading purpose in life. See that? Look at that. Okay. It says to detect whether there are any significant changes in PIL between groups. The scores were submitted to a one-way analysis of variance. The analysis was significant. Okay. The mean PIL scores are presented in Table 1. All right. Now, what is not okay is to stop there. Okay? Because you haven't said anything yet about the table other than there's stuff in there. But the reader doesn't know what to look for. If the reader does turn his or her eyes over to the table, the reader doesn't know what to see. Okay, what am I supposed to see when I look over there? Okay, you have to use words in the text to guide the reader's eyes to see what you want them to see. Remember, this is your presentation of your research. You don't just show them the table and say, oh, see it, make what you want out of it. No, no. That's a good way to lose the reader. That's an excellent way to have the reader stop reading your article. So look at how I've used words in that paragraph. It says, the mean PAL scores are presented in Table 1. And here's the key, looking across the top row of Table 1 reveals, okay? Now, what does the reader have to do to get it? They have to move their eyes over to Table 1, and they have to look across the row of the top row in the table. Okay, it says, looking across the top row of Table 1, oh, okay, so now my eyes go do that, reveals that within 1 week, the PIL scores goes up, and then goes, within the next month, it goes down, and then 6 months later, it goes up again. Okay? So what I've done is use words in the text to guide the reader's eyes through seeing what I intend for them to see, what the data show in the table. Okay? Then in the next paragraph, I go on and detail that by saying, well, Chaffee tests show that some of these trends are, significant at p less than 0.0 blah blah, right? Okay, those are sub-points that all matter. They all matter, but the reader's not going to get those. In fact, they don't make any sense until the writer has guided the reader's eyes through the table to see what's in there. Now, what this does is make the table, it integrates the table and the text into one thing. The table is part of the text. It's not an extra thing thrown out there for the person to just look at and you hope they just get it. And I'm telling you, all the time, I get papers that commit this error. They say, well, the means, or the data are in Table 1, and then they go on and say something else. And I'm thinking, whoa, well, okay, why is Table 1 there? And I have to teach authors. I have to teach authors this all the time. It's kind of tiring. So I never want to have to teach this to any of you. You are hereby held responsible for doing this right. Every time, from now on. Okay, but that's what I'm getting at. For how to use a table correctly. Now, I'm using this as in using the example of a table, but the same exact point is for a figure. Okay, some data you present as a figure, some you present as a table. Both are shorthand ways of presenting sort of lots of information that is kind of too long to write out in the text itself. See? And so that's why you don't repeat table material that is in the table and in the text. You don't, like if you report a statistic in the text, a P level or an F level, then you don't need to have it in the table. If you have it in the table, you don't need to have it in the text. You may talk about it in the text, but you don't need redundancy. Okay, I have to tell people to eliminate redundancy all the time. They put the same exact stuff in a table as in the text, as if a reader is really not reading. And that's no good. That's a waste of page space, waste of everybody's time, and ineffective. It's clutter. It gets in the way of communicating instead of enhancing communicating. Sometimes people think, well, if they put it in twice, the reader will really get it. Well, what it is it's an interference with clear communication to repeat something, or certainly repeat it too much. Which of course is what I may be doing right now. I don't know. but I'm getting. I made a deal with Dimitris. I'm getting something out of this. There's no free ride here with Paloutzian. I'm getting some Slovaki. I'm getting authentic Greek Slovaki by email after the show. Yeah, and of course I'm going to send him some Armenian shish kebab after the show, that's too. So we'll work that out. I decided we have to have a contest where we have a cooking contest and see whether my Armenian shish kebab is better than his Greek souvlaki, or they're the same. A psychophysics tasting test. Okay. All right. So that's a tip about tables and figures. And then I don't think I need to go through all of the same stuff for the results section, but if you look at it just quickly, you'll see the results section. Oh, excuse me, results. I'm talking about discussion, I meant. My mistake. I don't know that I need to say everything I've already said with reference to the discussion section, but the points are the same. This is not absolute, but the good default way to start thinking about where to put certain thoughts, where to put what thoughts in a discussion section, is to follow the same logic that you used before. So in this case, I have the discussion center heading, and under there's the first topic, or the first part of my rationale, conversion and purpose in life, generally. And then on page 1159, in the left column, there's the subheading values and purpose in life, which was my second question. And somewhere in there I discussed the item analyses, which I guess I wove into the purpose in life one there. And then closed with the limitations and directions section, which is often useful but not always essential. Depends. And if you do that, you got yourself a tight, focused paper. This is I use this. I use this particular paper for trying to illustrate these things. when I could use, lots of them. I edit good ones too, but this one is so brutally clear, I think. The lead sentences to the paragraphs I've walked us through are so plain to see what they're doing and how they're leading thoughts. It just seems like the perfect example, a perfect example to use to illustrate where to put what thoughts. And so I leave it with you, hoping that you take this and use it as a example to follow. And so when you're struggling and you're having doubts, like, where do I say what and how much am I supposed to say? And golly, how long is this supposed to be? Does this have to be 20 pages long? I really only want to do 5. Well, actually, if it's a journal article, it should only be 5. The chunking of the thoughts should be clear. And this is a way to make them clear. So I leave this with you as an example to use, to follow, to modify. To modify. And while you keep the same ingredients in, you might modify them, how you do them sometimes for a particular topic for which modifying it is a little better than exactly this sequence. But these are the logical points, and what you just got is a piece of my heart, actually, because I love this stuff, and I love how to do it, and I loved learning it, and I love editing it, and I love getting to do it myself once in a while. Is that all right so far?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Then what I've just done is, besides talk you through the paper itself, is I guess I've gone through first 2 pages of the other handout that I sent you. So I won't bother to try to say anything about that. Well, I'm looking at my own notes now. I'm looking at page 1 and 2 of what I sent you. And I do have to toss out a couple of tidbits. I'm looking under the methods section. I say, don't say random unless you mean random, actually random. How many of you know what, if you say random sample, if you say, I random sampled my subject, how many of you actually know what random actually means? Technically, how many of you know what mathematically random means? So that you can read somebody's paper, and if they say they did a random sample and then they describe what they did, that you can tell whether they actually did a random sample or they just used a random sample word in error. Huh? I don't see any hands. Okay. I will leave it to you to learn. But let me just tell you, if you just go out and grab a bunch of subjects off the street, that's not a random sample. Okay? If you just use your Psych 1 class, your Religious Studies 1 class, that's as a bunch of subjects, that's not a random sample. Now, if you had a class of 100 students, you could actually randomly sample from them. You could have everybody put their name on a piece of paper, crinkle it up, and put it in a barrel, and randomly pick out 50 of them, and that would be a random sample of the 100. But the sample of the sample as a whole would not be a random sample of the population of Prague. By the way, where are you located?
Brno.
Brno. Where's Brno on the map?
It's in the center.
Huh?
It's east of Prague, 200 kilometers east of Prague.
East of Prague. Okay. Well, okay. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be a random sample of Brno. It would be a random sample of the class. If you wanted to have actual random sample of the Czech Republic, then you have to actually sample the whole Czech Republic. And so don't say something. Don't say something way wrong that will show that you don't know what you're saying. That's bad for your chances of publishing a paper in a journal. Okay? So there's technical language that we have to talk with. All right. Oh yes, here's one: random assignment versus random sampling. Yeah. Don't say random sampling if what you actually mean is random assignment. Who knows the difference between those two things? Huh?
Everybody.
Okay, random sampling means you select the subjects, right, by chance, so that every possible subject has equal chance of being selected. Right. Random assignment means you have subjects, however you have them, but you assign them to your experimental group and your control group by chance. Okay, that's not a random sample, that's a random assignment. Okay, that's so keep those picky details different. I mean, I get that error all the time. All right, let me stop with this kind of structured lesson and move to what now is a whole second hour, for heaven's sakes. It's 10 o'clock on my time.